The dorm room felt unusually quiet when I pushed open the door at 2:30 p.m., my economics lecture having been canceled at the last minute. Christopher's backpack was draped over his desk chair, but he was nowhere to be seen, probably grabbing lunch or hitting the library like he always did between classes. I dropped my own bag and noticed his phone lying face up on his unmade bed, the screen still glowing from a recent notification. I wasn't trying to be nosy, but the voice memo app was open, showing a recording from just 20 minutes ago. The title made my stomach drop. About Kevin again? I can't keep doing this. My finger hovered over the play button for what felt like an eternity before curiosity won over respect for privacy. God, I'm pathetic. Christopher's voice filled the empty room, raw and vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. He came back from his morning run today, all sweaty and grinning about beating his personal record, and I wanted to kiss him so badly my chest hurt. 3 years of friendship, and I'm falling apart over my straight roommate like some cliché. My legs gave out, and I sank onto my desk chair, the phone trembling in my hands. Christopher's voice continued, each word hitting me like a physical blow. I keep telling myself it's just a phase, that maybe I'm confusing friendship with something else, but then he'll laugh at one of my stupid jokes or fall asleep during movie night with his head on my shoulder, and I know I'm completely gone. I've never felt this way about anyone before, guy or girl. What does that make me? The recording ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the phone in absolute shock. I scrolled through the voice memo list with shaking fingers, seeing dozens of entries dating back months, all with variations of my name in the titles. Kevin's girlfriend comments, "Why Kevin makes me nervous," that thing Kevin said about relationships. Subscribe for more love stories as we dive deeper into this emotional journey. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly placed the phone back where I'd found it, my mind reeling with the weight of Christopher's secret confessions. Everything I thought I knew about our friendship, about Christopher, about myself, had just been turned completely upside down. How long had he been carrying these feelings? How had I been so blind to what was happening right under my nose? The door handle turned, and I scrambled to look natural, grabbing a textbook and pretending to study while my heart hammered against my ribs. Christopher walked in with his usual easy smile, completely unaware that his deepest secret had just shattered my entire understanding of our relationship. The thing about living with someone for 3 years is that you develop a rhythm. Christopher and I had found ours freshman year when we were randomly assigned as roommates, two nervous 18-year-olds who bonded over late-night pizza and shared anxiety about college. By sophomore year, we'd requested to room together again, and now, halfway through junior year, our friendship felt as natural as breathing. We had our unspoken rules. Christopher got the desk by the window for his architecture projects. I claimed the mini-fridge for my energy drinks, and we both pretended not to notice when the other stayed up too late stress-eating during finals week. Christopher was the kind of person who made friends easily. He had this way of making everyone feel heard. Whether he was debating film theory in our shared cinema studies class or patiently explaining calculus to struggling classmates, I'd always admired that about him. How genuine he seemed, how comfortable in his own skin. While I tended to overthink every social interaction, Christopher moved through the world with an easy confidence that I envied. He was the one who convinced me to join the campus film society, who dragged me to parties when I would have happily spent Saturday nights rewatching movies alone, who somehow made our cramped dorm room feel like home. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined before yesterday, was that Christopher needed those voice memos to process emotions he couldn't share with anyone else. The recordings had revealed a side of him I'd never seen, vulnerable, uncertain, struggling with questions about his identity that he'd been carrying alone. In those intimate confessions, he talked about watching me during our study sessions, about the way his heart raced when our shoulders touched on the couch, about lying awake at night wondering if I'd ever see him as more than just a friend. Now, as I sat in our room waiting for him to return from his morning class, I found myself looking at everything differently. The way he'd insisted on getting matching desk lamps sophomore year, claiming it was just practical. How he always seemed to find excuses to walk past my desk when I was working, sometimes pausing to read over my shoulder. The careful way he'd arranged his architecture books on the shelf, making sure there was space for my film studies text right beside them. Were these the gestures of someone in love? Or was I reading too much into everything now that I knew his secret? I thought about the Christopher from the recordings, The one who whispered about wanting to hold my hand during movie nights, who confessed to memorizing my schedule so he could time his own around mine, who wondered aloud if I noticed how he looked at me. That Christopher felt like a stranger, yet somehow more real than the confident person I thought I knew. The vulnerability in his voice had been raw and honest in a way that made my chest tighten every time I remembered it. The door key rattled, and I tensed, knowing our easy dynamic would never be quite the same. Christopher walked in, backpack slung over his shoulder, looking perfectly normal except for the slight hesitation when he saw me. "Hey," he said, and I heard something different in his voice now, a carefulness that hadn't been there before, as if he was testing each word. I wondered if he could see the knowledge in my eyes, if somehow my face betrayed the secret I was carrying. The next morning, Kevin woke up before his alarm, his mind immediately flooding with fragments of Christopher's voice memos. He lay in bed listening to Christopher's steady breathing from across the room, hyper-aware of every sound his roommate made. When Christopher finally stirred, Kevin pretended to be asleep, watching through barely open eyes as Christopher stretched and ran his hands through his messy hair. The simple gesture made Kevin's chest tighten in a way he'd never experienced before. "Morning, sleepyhead," Christopher said softly, apparently thinking Kevin was still asleep. There was something tender in his voice that Kevin had never noticed before, or maybe he'd noticed but never understood its significance. Kevin forced himself to wake up naturally, mumbling a response while his heart hammered against his ribs. Throughout their morning routine, Kevin found himself analyzing every interaction with forensic precision. When Christopher handed him a cup of coffee, their fingers brushed, and Kevin wondered if Christopher had engineered the contact or if it was genuinely accidental. The touch sent electricity up his arm, and he nearly dropped the mug. Christopher's concerned, "You okay?" felt loaded with meaning Kevin couldn't decipher. Walking to class together, Kevin became intensely aware of their physical proximity. Christopher walked close enough that their shoulders occasionally bumped, and Kevin found himself cataloging each point of contact. Was this how Christopher always walked, or was Kevin just noticing now? The uncertainty was maddening. He caught himself stealing glances at Christopher's profile, studying the curve of his jaw and the way morning light caught in his dark hair. In their shared American literature class, Kevin couldn't concentrate on the discussion about forbidden love in classic novels. The irony wasn't lost on him. He watched Christopher take notes, remembering how the voice memos had revealed Christopher's fear of being discovered. Kevin wondered what it felt like to sit in a room discussing love while hiding such a fundamental truth about yourself. When their professor mentioned the complexity of unspoken desire, Kevin saw Christopher's pen pause mid-sentence. After class, Christopher suggested they grab lunch together, something they'd done hundreds of times before. But now Kevin felt like he was learning a new language of gestures and expressions. When Christopher laughed at something Kevin said, his smile lingered longer than usual, and Kevin found himself staring at his lips. The realization that he was attracted to Christopher hit him like a physical blow. He'd never questioned his sexuality before, had dated girls throughout high school, but something about knowing Christopher's secret had unlocked feelings he didn't know existed. "Earth to Kevin," Christopher said, waving a hand in front of his face. "You've been weird all day. Everything okay?" Kevin's heart raced. Christopher was looking at him with genuine concern, and Kevin could see the boy from the voice memos in his expression, vulnerable, caring, afraid of losing their connection. "Just tired," Kevin managed, hating how the light tasted. That afternoon, they studied together in their room, sprawled on their respective beds with textbooks scattered around them. Kevin found himself watching Christopher instead of reading, noticing how he chewed on his pen when thinking, how he unconsciously ran his fingers through his hair when frustrated. These weren't new behaviors, but Kevin's awareness of them felt revolutionary. "I can feel you staring," Christopher said without looking up from his psychology textbook. There was something playful in his tone, but Kevin detected an underlying nervousness. "Do I have something on my face?" Kevin's breath caught. "No, sorry. I'm distracted today." Christopher looked up then, and their eyes met across the small room. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken tension. Kevin felt like Christopher could see straight through him, could tell that everything had changed. Christopher's expression shifted, becoming more guarded, and Kevin wondered if his roommate sensed something was different. "Maybe we should take a break," Christopher suggested, closing his book. "Want to grab dinner?" At the dining hall, Kevin noticed how Christopher's eyes followed other guys, something he'd never paid attention to before. When an attractive senior from their floor walked by, Christopher's gaze lingered just a moment too long. Kevin felt an unexpected surge of jealousy that surprised him with its intensity. The emotion was so foreign and powerful that he nearly choked on his water. "You sure you're okay?" Christopher asked again, his brow furrowed with worry. "You're acting really strange." Kevin wanted to tell him everything, that he'd heard the voice memos, that he understood now, that his own feelings were shifting in ways that terrified and thrilled him. Instead, he nodded and changed the subject, even as his mind raced with the implications of his growing attraction. That night, Kevin lay awake listening to Christopher's breathing, wondering if his roommate was recording another voice memo in his head, processing the day's interactions. Kevin found himself hoping Christopher had noticed the change in him, even as he feared what that might mean for their friendship. The soft glow of Kevin's desk lamp cast long shadows across the dorm room as he tried to focus on his economics textbook, but the words blurred together on the page. 3 days had passed since his discovery of Christopher's voice memos, and the weight of that secret knowledge felt heavier with each passing hour. Every conversation between them had become a minefield of unspoken truths, every casual touch a moment of electric tension that left Kevin questioning everything he thought he knew about himself and their friendship. Christopher sat at his own desk across the room, supposedly working on a paper for his literature class, but Kevin could sense the restless energy radiating from his roommate. The way Christopher's pen tapped against his notebook, the frequent glances toward his phone, the soft sighs that escaped when he thought Kevin wasn't listening, it all painted a picture of someone struggling with an internal battle that Kevin now understood all too well. "I'm going to grab some coffee from the common room," Christopher announced suddenly, pushing back from his desk with more force than necessary. "Want anything?" Kevin looked up from his textbook, catching the nervous energy in Christopher's movements, the way his fingers drummed against his thigh. "No, I'm good. Thanks, though." Christopher nodded and headed for the door, but Kevin noticed how he paused with his hand on the doorknob, as if he wanted to say something more. Instead, he simply left, closing the door behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Kevin tried to return to his reading, but his mind kept wandering to the conversation they'd had earlier about their plans for winter break. Christopher had mentioned wanting to tell someone something important, and the way he looked at Kevin when he said it had made Kevin's heart race in ways he was still trying to understand. The attraction he discovered within himself wasn't fading. If anything, it was growing stronger with each passing day, complicated by the knowledge that Christopher felt the same way but couldn't bring himself to voice it. 20 minutes later, Christopher returned with a steaming mug of coffee and an expression that suggested he'd used the time away to build up his courage for something. He settled back at his desk, but instead of opening his laptop, he reached for his phone. Kevin watched from his peripheral vision as Christopher pulled up what looked like a voice recording app, his thumb hovering over the record button. "I'm just going to step out for a minute," Christopher said, his voice carefully casual. "Need to make a quick call." But instead of leaving the room, Christopher moved to the small alcove by their window, partially hidden behind the curtain they'd hung there earlier in the semester. Kevin realized with a jolt that Christopher wasn't planning to make a call at all. He was about to record another voice memo, thinking Kevin couldn't hear him from across the room. Kevin's heart hammered against his ribs as he heard the soft beep of the recording starting. He should put in his headphones, should give Christopher the privacy he thought he had, but something kept him frozen in place, listening despite knowing he shouldn't. "It's me again." Christopher's voice drifted across the room, barely above a whisper but clear enough for Kevin to catch every word. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending that everything is normal when it's not. Kevin's been acting strange lately, and I keep wondering if somehow he knows. If he's figured out how I feel about him." Kevin's textbook slipped from his numb fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud that made him wince. But Christopher was too caught up in his confession to notice. "I think I need to tell him," Christopher continued, his voice gaining strength. "I think I need to be honest about everything, about being gay, about having feelings for him, about all of it. I can't keep living like this, recording these stupid messages instead of just talking to the person I care about most. Maybe he'll hate me for it. Maybe it'll ruin our friendship, but at least I'll know. At least I'll have been honest." The recording stopped with another soft beep, and Kevin heard Christopher's sharp intake of breath, as if he'd surprised himself with his own words. In the silence that followed, Kevin could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears, could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him like a physical force. He couldn't pretend anymore. He couldn't sit here knowing what he knew, feeling what he felt, and continue to let Christopher agonize over a secret that was already out in the open. The fear in Christopher's voice, the self-doubt and pain, it was unbearable to witness when Kevin had the power to ease that suffering. "Chris," Kevin said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. Christopher went completely still behind the curtain, and Kevin could practically feel the panic radiating from him. When Christopher finally stepped back into view, his face was pale, his phone clutched tightly in his trembling hand. "How long have you been listening?" Christopher asked, his voice barely audible. Kevin turned in his chair to face him fully, his own hand shaking as he gripped the armrests. "Long enough. But Chris, this isn't the first time." The confusion in Christopher's eyes quickly gave way to understanding, then horror. "Oh God. You've heard them before. You've heard the others." "I didn't mean to," Kevin said quickly, standing up from his chair. "Your phone was on my desk, and a notification came up, and I heard one by accident. And then I couldn't stop thinking about it." Christopher's face cycled through a dozen emotions: embarrassment, fear, anger, resignation. "How many did you hear?" "Just a few. But enough to know how you feel about me. About us." The silence stretched between them like a chasm, filled with years of friendship and days of newfound tension. Christopher's grip on his phone tightened until his knuckles went white. "Are you disgusted?" Christopher asked finally, his voice cracking. "Do you hate me?" Kevin's heart broke at the question, at the raw vulnerability in Christopher's voice. He took a step forward, then another, until he was standing close enough to see the unshed tears in Christopher's eyes. "No," Kevin said firmly. "I'm not disgusted. I don't hate you. I'm confused as hell, and I'm scared, but I'm not disgusted." Christopher's eyes searched his face desperately. "Scared of what?" Kevin took a shaky breath, feeling like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. "Scared because I think I might feel the same way about you." The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of everything that had just been exposed. Christopher sat on the edge of his bed, his phone still clutched in his trembling hands, while Kevin remained frozen by his desk, both of them processing the magnitude of what had just happened. The voice memo had ended, but its words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to take back or ignore. "How long?" Christopher finally whispered, his voice barely audible. "How long have you been hearing them?" Kevin's throat felt dry as sandpaper. "A few weeks. Maybe more. I kept telling myself I should say something, but He trailed off, running his hands through his hair. "I didn't know how to bring it up without making everything weird." "Everything's already weird," Christopher said with a bitter laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "God, Kevin, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to hear any of that. I thought I was being careful with the volume. I thought you were always asleep or studying with headphones on." "You were careful," Kevin said quietly, taking a tentative step closer. "It's just that I'm a light sleeper, and your voice carries more than you think. Especially when you're being so honest." Christopher looked up at him then, his eyes rimmed with unshed tears. "Honest about what?" "About how pathetic I am. About how I've been pining after my straight roommate like some cliché." "You're not pathetic," Kevin said firmly, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "And you don't know that I'm straight." The words hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to see. Christopher's eyes widened, searching Kevin's face for any sign of false hope or cruel jest. Kevin felt his heart hammering against his ribs, amazed that he'd actually said it out loud. "What do you mean?" Christopher asked, his voice barely a whisper. Kevin moved closer, settling into his desk chair so they were facing each other across the small space of their dorm room. "I mean that listening to your voice memos has been doing things to me that I don't fully understand. I mean that I've been lying awake at night thinking about what you said, about how you feel, about how it makes me feel. How does it make you feel?" Christopher's question was tentative, as if he was afraid of the answer. "Confused," Kevin admitted. "Scared. But also flattered? Honored? I don't know the right word for it." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Chris, I've never questioned my sexuality before. I've dated girls. I've been attracted to women. But hearing you talk about me like that, hearing the way you describe our friendship." He paused, searching for the right words. "It's made me realize that maybe I've been missing something about myself." Christopher's grip on his phone loosened slightly. You're not just saying that to make me feel better? No, Kevin said without hesitation. I'm saying it because it's true. Because when you talked about wanting to hold my hand during that movie last week, I remembered how I'd actually shifted closer to you on the couch. Because when you mentioned how you like the way I smell, I realized I've been using that cologne more often since we became roommates. Kevin. Christopher's voice was thick with emotion. I'm saying it because I've been finding excuses to touch you more often. Your shoulder when I'm reading over your notes, your back when I'm passing behind you in the kitchen. I told myself it was just friendly, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe I've been as confused as you are. Christopher set his phone aside and really looked at Kevin, studying his face as if seeing him for the first time. Where does this leave us? I don't know, Kevin said honestly. I know I don't want to lose you as a friend. I know that living with you has been the best part of college for me. And I know that the idea of you moving out or us becoming strangers terrifies me more than figuring out what these feelings mean. I don't want to lose you either, Christopher said. That's why I never said anything directly. That's why I kept it all in those stupid voice memos. They're not stupid, Kevin said. They're brave. They're more honest than I've ever been with myself about anything. Christopher stood up slowly, moving to sit on Kevin's bed instead, closer to where Kevin sat in the chair. So what do we do now? Maybe we start by being honest with each other instead of hiding behind assumptions, Kevin suggested. Maybe we acknowledge that this friendship has already changed, and instead of being scared of that, we figure out what it's changing into. Are you saying you want to explore this? Whatever this is. Kevin nodded, his heart racing. I'm saying I want to explore it with you. I'm saying that if I'm going to question everything I thought I knew about myself, I can't think of anyone I'd rather do it with. Christopher's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked like tears of relief rather than fear. I can't believe this is happening. Neither can I, Kevin admitted. But I'm tired of pretending I don't feel something when I do. I'm tired of acting like those voice memos didn't affect me when they've been all I can think about. Kevin, Christopher said, his voice steady for the first time since the conversation began. I need you to know that whatever happens, however this turns out, I meant everything I said in those recordings. My feelings for you are real. I know, Kevin said. And I need you to know that I'm not just curious or experimenting. If we do this, if we try to be more than friends, it's because I want to be with you specifically. Not because I'm trying to figure myself out, but because I think I already have. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Kevin could see Christopher's phone sitting on his desk, the same device that had held all those secret confessions, all those vulnerable moments he'd never meant to share. Something shifted in Christopher's expression, a kind of desperate resolve settling over his features. I want to show you something, Christopher said quietly, reaching for his phone. The first one. The one that started all of this. Kevin's heart hammered against his ribs. Chris, you don't have to. I do. Christopher's fingers trembled slightly as he scrolled through his recordings. You heard pieces, fragments. But you never heard the whole truth. Not the way I meant to say it. The room felt impossibly small as Christopher found what he was looking for. His thumb hovered over the play button, and Kevin could see the war playing out across his face, the terror of complete exposure battling against something stronger, something that looked like hope. This is from 3 weeks ago, Christopher whispered. The night after we fell asleep watching that stupid movie, and I woke up with your head on my shoulder. He pressed play, and suddenly the room filled with his own voice, softer and more uncertain than Kevin had ever heard it in person. I don't know what's happening to me. The recording began, and Kevin watched Christopher's face as his past self continued. I keep telling myself it's just friendship, just normal roommate stuff. But God, Kevin, the way you looked at me today when I made the joke about your bedhead. You were laughing, but there was this moment where our eyes met, and I swear I felt something shift between us. Kevin's breath caught. He remembered that moment, remembered the strange flutter in his chest that he'd dismissed as nothing. I've never felt this way about anyone, Christopher's recorded voice continued. I've dated girls. I've tried to be normal, but nothing has ever felt as real as this. As real as wanting to reach out and touch your face when you're concentrating on homework. As real as lying awake at night wondering what it would feel like to kiss you. The Christopher sitting beside him was crying now, silent tears tracking down his cheeks as his own words filled the space between them. I'm scared. The recording went on. I'm scared that I'm gay. I'm scared that I'm not. I'm scared that these feelings will ruin everything we have. But mostly I'm scared that I'm falling in love with my best friend, and he'll never feel the same way about me. The recording ended, and the silence that followed felt different, charged with truth and possibility rather than fear. I listened to that, Kevin said slowly, his voice rough with emotion, and I realized something. All those moments you described, all those looks and touches, I felt them too. I just didn't know what they meant. Christopher looked up at him, eyes wide and vulnerable. What do you mean? I mean, when you made the joke about my bedhead, I wasn't just laughing. I was thinking about how much I loved seeing you happy, how much I wanted to keep that smile on your face forever. Kevin's heart was racing, but the words felt right, felt true. I mean, I've been lying awake at night too, wondering why everything feels different when you're around. Kevin, I think I've been falling for you too, Kevin admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush. I just didn't have the courage to admit it to myself until I heard you say it first. 3 weeks later, Kevin woke to the familiar sound of Christopher's voice drifting from across the room, but this time he wasn't hiding behind a closed door. Christopher sat cross-legged on his bed, phone in hand, speaking softly into his voice memo app. Day 21 of dating my best friend. Christopher's voice carried a warmth that made Kevin's chest flutter. Kevin's still asleep, looking ridiculously cute with his hair sticking up everywhere. I keep thinking about how terrified I was that night he confronted me about the recordings. Now I can't imagine hiding any of this from him. Kevin stretched, making a deliberately loud yawn. Christopher looked over with a grin that still made Kevin's stomach flip. Morning, boyfriend, Christopher said, ending the recording. Morning, Kevin replied, the word boyfriend still feeling wonderfully foreign on his tongue. New memo. Want to hear it? Kevin nodded, padding over to sit beside Christopher on the narrow dorm bed. They'd established this new ritual, sharing the voice memos that had once been Christopher's secret outlet. Now they were windows into both their hearts. As Christopher played back his recording, Kevin found himself thinking about how much had changed in their small dorm room. The same desk where Kevin had first discovered Christopher's phone now held framed photos of them together. The same beds where they'd once maintained careful distance were now pushed closer together. I love listening to how happy you sound, Kevin said when the recording ended. Christopher leaned against him, solid and warm. I love that you get to hear it now. No more secrets. No more secrets, Kevin agreed, pressing a kiss to Christopher's temple. Outside their window, campus was waking up to another ordinary day. But inside room 237, two best friends who'd become something more were writing the next chapter of their story, one honest word at a time.